And away we go. Episode 1131 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Tuesday, August 12th, 2025. It is the day of an intra-squad scrimmage for the Commanders. It is the day of the Burgundy and Gold Scrimmage, a concept that was introduced to us by head coach Dan Quinn during his pre-practice press conference on Monday afternoon. The team, including players and coaches, over Monday and Tuesday has been divided up into two teams, culminating in an intra-squad scrimmage on Tuesday morning. The Burgundy and Gold Scrimmage. Are you Team Burgundy or Team Gold? I'm with whatever team is Jaden Daniels as its quarterback. How about that? But yeah, the Burgundy and Gold Scrimmage. Something to shake things up as we are in the dog days of Commanders training camp. Hello and welcome to this Tuesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. Next segment, discussion of the Burgundy and Gold Scrimmage and plenty more off the Commanders preseason opening 48-18 loss at the New England Patriots this past Friday night, including reaction to the Commanders on Monday morning announcing a bunch of roster moves. Among those moves, the releasing of linebacker Dominique Hampton, on whom the team spent a fifth-round pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. And then the following segment, high-level X's and O's analysis of the performance of the Commanders' 2025 NFL Draft class in the loss at the Pats, as I'll speak with Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark will give us a superb analysis of right tackle Josh Conerly Jr., cornerback Trey Amos, running back Jacory Croskey-Merritt, receiver Jalen Lane, and linebacker/safety Kane Medrano in terms of how each guy did on Friday night. Spoiler alert, Conerly, Amos, and Croskey-Merritt did quite well. And also on the show, I'll talk Nationals. They on Monday night lost at the Kansas City Royals 7-4 in a game in which the Nats blew a 4-2 six-inning lead, and in a game in which starting pitcher Cade Cavalli had a second consecutive encouraging outing until he didn't. No game for the Orioles on Monday, but they on Monday evening announced that starting pitcher Grayson Rodriguez on Monday underwent debridement surgery to remove a bone spur in his right elbow. We were anticipating that surgery. Rodriguez's season is done before ever beginning. He did not pitch in a single game in MLB's 2025 regular season. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me, the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Email from Kim on the Commanders preseason opening blowout loss at the Pats this past Friday night. Writes Kim, "Hi Al, I know you will say, Kim, it's preseason, but let's hope none of our starters go down, as this was a horrible display, especially from our special teams unit. Seriously, this was bad stuff, and I'm disappointed." Thank you for the email, Kim. I get where you're coming from, but yes, Kim, it is only the preseason. And yeah, the Commanders for the game did not play 29 starters/key players. 29, whereas the Pats played a good number of starters/key players. But to Kim's point about the game exposing a lack of depth for the Commanders, I don't think that she's necessarily wrong about that. I think that is something that was exposed in this game. There are depth concerns with this team, especially with the offensive line, receiving core, and linebacker core. I don't think that it's an overreaction to the game to have depth concerns, in part because those depth concerns existed before the game. Email from Stanley Evans on the Commanders and receiver Terry McLaurin, of him having requested to be traded while in the midst of stalled contract extension negotiations. Right, Stanley, in a weird way sometimes, when you speed up the timeline, that throws off the front office's plan. That might not directly cause the issues we're seeing, but that can definitely create confusion for the people making the decisions. Ironically, every team wants to win as soon as possible, but sometimes early success brings more challenges than you'd expect. Whether I'm right or wrong, this Terry situation has become a distraction, and the sooner it is resolved, the better for everyone. Thank you for the email, Stanley. I don't think that the Terry McLaurin situation is a distraction for the team, but Stanley does raise an interesting point about the Commanders' competitive timeline having been sped up, of course, by quarterback Jaden Daniels being so good. What if the Commanders last season, instead of this amazing renaissance season, had instead had just like an okay season? improvement from the hideous 2023 season, but nothing special, not a playoff team. In other words, what if the competitive timeline for the team was more normal / measured / gradual instead of this hyper improvement that we saw last season to where the rebuild lasted for just 1 year? Would things be any different in this Terry McLaurin situation right now? Would his demands be lower? Would the team be even less willing to sign him to a big money contract extension given that the team would not be in win-now mode? It's an interesting thought exercise, but there's no doubt that Jayden Daniels being so good changed a lot with the competitive timeline for the Commanders. We've talked about the Nats rebuild taking forever. The Commanders rebuild was the exact opposite, lightning quick. Email from David on Orioles season tickets. David in his email includes a letter from Orioles President of Business Operations, Katie Griggs, who in the letter notes of change in season ticket plans being offered for the O's for the 2026 season. This change was written about by a good friend of this podcast, Jeff Barker of the Baltimore Sun. He in a post on X on August 7th wrote, quote, "The Orioles are overhauling their ticket plans, ending the long-standing 13-game and 29-game offerings next season and adding new packages they say will provide more flexibility, but cost on average 3% more," end quote. Writes David, "Is it too late to ask for Peter Angelos back?" Rubenstein isn't exactly killing it as an owner. Now this. Apparently too many people have the 13-game plan and the team isn't making enough money, so the team is killing the Sunday plan in an effort to suck more blood from the stone. I used to live in Moco, but currently travel 150 miles from Richmond to go to each Sunday game, usually 2.5 to 3 hours up, and sometimes 4+ hours on the way back, ... 95. I've had my tickets for 20+ years, which, as you know, is a lot of bad baseball. A lot of that was a good faith investment that when the team got good, you promised something about pain today, joy later. It would pay off in the end. I guess sometimes the end comes sooner than you expect. I can't see myself commuting up for a Tuesday game in the middle of the week 20 times or even 10 to make it worth the investment. Since you still cover the team so that others don't have to, I thought that it would be worthwhile to pass this on to you. We'll always have Masson Plus and that wonderful Masson theme song. Thank you very much for the email, David. David, clearly a long-time and loyal listener. I appreciate that very much. And this is the only Washington, D.C. area podcast or show of any kind that covers both the Nats and the O's, because this show acknowledges that there are still many O's fans in the D.C. area. MLB owners on March 27th, 2024, one day before 2024 opening day, unanimously approved the sale of the Orioles from the Angelos family to a group led by private equity billionaire David Rubenstein. This was a joyous day for Orioles fans, akin to July 21st, 2023 for Commanders fans. That was the day on which we had the closing of the sale of the team from Dan and Tanya Snyder to the Josh Harris Group. I like David Rubenstein. I much prefer him being the Orioles controlling owner as opposed to John Angelos. And the O's this past offseason, contrary to what some think, did spend decent money on free agents. But look, the way that the Orioles 2024 season ended was really bad, getting swept in 2 games by the Kansas City Royals in a best-of-3 American League wildcard series in which the O's totaled a mere 1 run, and both games were at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And the Orioles 2025 season, of course, has been a colossal disappointment. Now, regarding what Dave wrote about in his email, I hear you, Dave. I think that all teams in all sports should be as flexible and open-minded as possible when it comes to season ticket plans for fans. Fans who are willing to buy season tickets in some way should be treated like gold by teams, especially a team like the O's, who have had big-time attendance problems for years now, and especially with a guy like Dave, who drives so much to go to Orioles games. 100% the team should treat Dave like gold. And while we're talking about the O's in terms of ownership, how about this fact? Since the O's hired Mike Elias as executive vice president and general manager in November 2018, the O's are the only MLB team to have not signed a player to a contract extension of 4 or more guaranteed years. Think about that. Only team in MLB. Now, that says a lot about the previous ownership, the Angelos family, but the O's now have a lot of quality young players, principal among them shortstop Gunnar Henderson. Going to be very interesting to see if the O's under David Rubenstein sign any of these guys to big money contract extensions. We in recent years have seen a lot of big money contract extensions for quality young players throughout MLB. 0 by the O's. Hey, if you are a Commanders fan and you're looking for good conversation about the team, check out bgobsession.com. BG Obsession, or BGO, has been the home of the most knowledgeable, friendly, and passionate Washington fans on the web since 2009. BGO is a special place in which you can join your fellow fans for smart football discussion, great contests, game day chats, and even lifelong friendships. If you are turned off by the toxicity of social media, visit and join BGO at bgobsession.com. bgobsession.com, home to your Burgundy and Gold obsession. Hey, please consider subscribing to the podcast if you're not already doing that. Subscribing to the podcast costs nothing. Make sure that you never miss an episode and helps out the podcast a lot. And if you're already subscribing, thank you. The Commanders on Monday morning announced a flurry of roster moves off the team's preseason opening 48-18 loss at the New England Patriots this past Friday night. Though with these moves, pretty clearly was a message of, hey, what happened on Friday night was not good enough. The moves included the Commanders releasing 3 players and linebacker Dominique Hampton, edge defender Laremy Tunsil Jr., and cornerback Allen George, and signing 3 unrestricted free agents and linebacker Duke Riley and cornerbacks Isang Bassi and Antonio Hamilton Sr. Now, before we go any further, the fact that Laremy Tunsil Jr. and Allen George were released on Monday morning tells you about the players who played for the Commanders on Friday night. Remember, 29 starters/key players did not play for the team in this game. But what stood out the most in terms of what the team announced on Monday morning was the team releasing Dominique Hampton. Hampton, in the loss at the Pats, had a terrible game in playing on 66% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. So the Commanders took Hampton out of the University of Washington in the 5th round of the 2024 NFL Draft. He, in the 2024 regular season, was inactive for each of the Commanders' first 16 games. He then finally was active for the regular season-ending 23-19 win at the Dallas Cowboys this past January 5th, but he in that game did not play on any of the Commanders' defensive snaps. He in the game did play on special teams, and then he was a healthy and active for each of the Commanders' 3 games this past postseason. I have 2 reactions to the Commanders releasing Dominique Hampton. A, bravo to General Manager Adam Peters for releasing a player in Hampton on whom Peters spent a 5th-round pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. No insecurity from Peters about looking bad for making a bad pick. Everything that Peters does as the person in charge of the team's football operations should be about performance and what is best for the team, and those principles are what we have here. So I do say bravo to Adam Peters. I'm not saying, build him a statue for doing this, okay? But I do say bravo. B, Peters clearly did blow it in taking Hampton in the 5th round of the 2024 NFL Draft, and that does need to be acknowledged. Now, whiffing on a 5th-round pick isn't the end of the world, but this was a whiff. And, regarding the value of a 5th-round pick, well, keep in mind how the Commanders got receiver Deebo Samuel Sr. via trade with the San Francisco 49ers this past March. The Commanders traded a, 5th-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft to the Niners. The Commanders held a jog-through type practice on Monday afternoon. Commanders head coach Dan Quinn did a pre-practice press conference on Monday afternoon. During that presser, had this exchange between WUSA 9 sports anchor Chick Hernandez and Quinn, and then you'll hear a follow-up back and forth between Commanders insider Ben Standig and Quinn.
Coach, you made a couple of roster moves today, including one guy you drafted last year in Dom Hampton. How do you approach that? I know it's maybe the worst part of your job. How do you approach that conversation?
Yes, and it is. It's a hard part of it. And but yeah, we did make that move today. And when you go through it, we were talking about, it's comprehensive of details to go, and sometimes you take it as far as you can, try to give as much support to all the guys as we can. But if it's not going to fit, we'd rather, give him a chance to go see if he can do his thing somewhere else. We got high regard for Dom. We absolutely loved working with him. But if it wasn't going to fit for us, then we want to certainly go give him a chance to go do that. And sometimes it's a little easier now than later.
To stay on that decision, you guys brought in a lot of veteran linebackers. Obviously, you signed Duke Riley. What was the decision to want to bring in more experienced guys there? Obviously, you have Bobby Wagner, but to bring in another guy with experience.
don't know if it was experience necessarily, Ben. We just thought, it was time. And so going into it, Kane and Ale and Cam as younger players to go. Nick was more on the special team side. We don't give him a lot of reps, so we just felt like we needed another player. And so we brought some guys in yesterday at linebacker and at some other spots too. And we felt like this was the best spot now.
You didn't bring in any wide receivers. That's been a conversation, especially with some of the guys missing. Is that a fact of like we really do like the guys we have and we want to give them more run, or other factors that just decided we're not going to bring anyone in?
Yeah, it's definitely the first one. But one thing like I said the other day with Adam and his staff, like we're always going to compete and keep digging in to find if there's a fit that's good for us. We're going to look into it. But we do like chances and things we're seeing, but you do have to push it and allow that space to happen, Ben. So we want to continue to do that.
Yeah, for as much talk as there is about the Commanders not being well off at receiver, it does stand out that none of the three players who the team signed on Monday morning is a receiver. The Commanders' next preseason game is not until this Monday night, Commanders versus the Cincinnati Bengals at Northwest Stadium on Monday Night Football at 8. And so the Commanders this week do have some flexibility with what they do, and that flexibility has led to a Burgundy and Gold scrimmage on Tuesday morning. Perhaps this is going to become a tradition for the team, the annual Burgundy and Gold scrimmage, an August tradition. We'll see. What is the Burgundy and Gold scrimmage, you ask? Well, this was Dan Quinn during the opening statement of his pre-practice press conference on Monday afternoon.
We will have, kind of fill you on the next 2 days. We're going to have a lot of fun. So today's going to be a jog through. We broke the team up into two. So we have a Burgundy team, a Gold team, talk about players, coaches, staff, strength and conditioning, equipment, training, like you name it. And part of it is developing leaders. There'll be different play callers, as we're going through it. But it's also about competing. Different looks, different matchups. And tomorrow we'll have a Burgundy and Gold game. And so we'll start at 9:30. We'll play a second quarter, try to work some situations in. We'll also work of some fourth quarter stuff to work some situations. So in your mind, think of like a joint practice, but it's just one team. Like splitting the teams up, different sidelines, and then going to it. So I'll hit you up with injuries for tomorrow, who will participate and who won't. And with all that said, get it rocking with you guys.
All right, I like this. A Burgundy and Gold scrimmage, a joint practice-like occurrence, but just with the Commanders themselves. Something to break up the monotony of training camp. And maybe the team could use a breaking up of the monotony off what happened this past Friday night. What is the origin of the Burgundy and Gold scrimmage? We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider John Keim of ESPN and Dan Quinn.
Dan, I'm curious about what you're going to do tomorrow. Have you done this before, and what do you...
I've been very excited about this, John. For like in the summer, you're thinking about some things to do, and I recognized there was a longer than normal gap between our first preseason game and our second preseason game. So I thought this is the ideal time to do it. I love the staff, who the makeup is, what they are, and so I also thought of them to say, let's split them, on the sides to do that. Some different play callers. We've got a great succession plan in place for when people do get big opportunities to do things. And so this is an example of trying to say, we're going to develop you here while you're here. And you have to go through those, solve problems, figure it out onto the sideline to do that. And then for the players, just, it still comes back to competing. And so different plays, different ways, how you're featuring guys. It's an important 2 days. It's a fun 2 days. And then we'll kind of get back into a routine on Thursday of kind of a leading up into our game against Cincinnati. We'll have some days where we're just competing against ourselves, but we'll get back into a more traditional one. So these 2 days for us, it's a lot of fun because it's a break from the rhythm, a break from the norm. And, just for 2 days, man, it's against each other and having fun with it.
So Dan Quinn regarding the Burgundy and Gold scrimmage, bringing up a break from the rhythm, a break from the norm. So what we just talked about, the breaking up of the monotony of training camp. But also notable was Quinn mentioning the development of coaches in addition to the development of players. Developing coaches is a big thing for Quinn. He has brought that up multiple times. He, in that cut that I just played for you, even used the phrase, quote, succession plan, end quote. I.e., if offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury leaves the team after this coming season for a head coaching job, what is the succession plan? Never, ever forget what happened with Quinn as Atlanta Falcons head coach. He was the Falcons head coach February 2015 to October 2020. His overall regular season record as Falcons head coach was one game above 500, 43-42. Former Redskins offensive coordinator and current Niners head coach Kyle Shanahan was the Falcons offensive coordinator January 2015 to February 2017. Quinn's regular season record as Falcons head coach with Shanahan was 29-19. Quinn's regular season record as Falcons head coach without Shanahan was 14-23. Dan Quinn did not have a proper succession plan for Kyle Shanahan, and that maybe more than anything is what doomed Quinn as Falcons head coach, and Quinn, to his credit, learned from that. Also from Dan Quinn on Monday afternoon was an injury reveal. Left tackle Laremy Tunsil is ailing. The very first exchange of Quinn's pre-practice press conference on Monday afternoon was this exchange between Adam Kilgore of the Washington Post and Quinn.
Sorry to start with an injury question, but we saw Laremy kind of maybe got dinged up a little bit at practice yesterday. How is he doing? Is he going to be able to participate?
Yeah, he's doing well. He was hoping to come back, but we'll have a better sense. He'll do some today, and then heading into tomorrow, we're anticipating him being able to go. Some of that, when that happens, hey, let's be smart. Let's wait and assess it, make sure the strength's good, and but we're encouraged by into tomorrow.
All right, so the Commanders' offensive line is dealing with some injuries. Laremy Tunsil, left guard Brandon Coleman, right guard Samuel Cosme, who was on the active/physically unable to perform list. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between John Keim and Dan Quinn.
On the offensive line specifically, when you're not having Brandon out there and obviously Sam, you're still not sure yet, how do you make sure that group kind of gels? Because if those are the guys that you anticipate being out there eventually, like what's that process, and is that, I don't know about a concern, but like how do you work through that?
Yeah, there's concern. I like the group though, John, and it starts with communication. What does the guard and tackle say on a combination block? What's the center and the guard? What's the tight end? How is that going? That part's just a regular standard. Boom, this is how we do it. What you're missing on when you're not all the way together, sometimes it's the nonverbal cues that you're just, when you're working side by side with somebody, we've all been there, you just kind of step into a rhythm together. So you have to be really intentional about those communications. They spend, obviously, the meeting times together, even when they're injured. But being in the moment when it happens really quickly, that's a big deal. And we'll continue to work hard to find our spaces to do it. It does happen a lot. We're not, very often, I don't know many through the league, you guys would know throughout a whole season how many times does, one line play the whole time. Not that often, especially as the, extended games. So going through ones like now and today and where different people are in and different voices, I don't mind it. I'd welcome it because it allows different chances. And you do want to find out who can shine in those spots, John, because they may not be a starter and they know that, but I can also show I can be a backup with limited reps with that person and still produce at a high level. So there's an opportunity, but you do have to go take it.
Well, another Commanders player who has been hurting is the team's QB2, Marcus Mariota. He's dealing with what Dan Quinn during a pre-practice press conference on August 6th called a lower leg strain. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider Nikki Javala of The Athletic and Dan Quinn.
And I know you said you'd update us on participation for guys later, but with Marcus Mariota, the fact that he hasn't been on the field much in camp, what's your level of concern there?
I'll fill you in all those tomorrow. When it's higher, or a longer timeout, there's always more. When it's a long-term one, obviously I have the most concerns. But, I wish he was out here all the time. But I know that he's able to throw. He's working to the side, and we're getting closer. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, and Marcus Mariota being hurt is part of why the Commanders' QB3 competition matters. And we had the loss at the Pats this past Friday night had Josh Johnson creating significant separation between himself and Sam Hartman in that QB3 competition with how competent Johnson was. Not great, but competent, and how poorly Hartman played. By the way, regarding injuries, the Commanders on Monday morning did announce having placed 2 players on the reserve/injured list off injuries suffered in the loss at the Pats. Offensive tackle Lucas Niang and cornerback Kevon Seymour. This episode of the podcast is for Tuesday, August 12th, 2 weeks to the day of the Commanders' cut down to 53, the setting of the initial 53-man roster for the 2025 season. It is on Tuesday, August 26th that each NFL team must have its active roster at a maximum of 53 players by 4 p.m. Eastern. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between 7 News DC sports directors Scott Abraham and Dan Quinn.
Hey, Dan, when it comes to kind of figuring this, 53-man roster down the road here, when it comes to the evaluation, do you look at kind of the total body of work with all the practices of training camp, or is it just these 3 preseason games? How do you kind of judge that type of analysis?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you try to do it in totality. So in our next personnel meeting, it will include the New England game, but also what have you seen up to camp. So you want some days where you can talk through them, but you also need some space. Where is he at today? What do you want to see more of? And so you don't separate them all the way. You want to make it as comprehensive as you can. They just happen to have, more time, more exposures in the games, but no, you want to do it as the whole thing.
Yes, you do. And then with the nature of the loss at the Pats, a bad performance by, yes, a Commanders team that played so few key players, but the sloppiness of the Commanders in the game was really bad. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Candy Waller of Bowie TV Sports and Dan Quinn.
Some may say that, it's just preseason, like air quotes, it's just preseason. So from your perspective, what is so important about the preseason?
There's a lot, and I honestly love it. I really do. There's so many things. We could talk a long time on this with Candy. There's the development of the youngest players who need the most experience. That's like, let's put that in category A. First game, usually you see trying too hard, been waiting so long to do it, and then they get back to it. Okay, it's just football. I've been doing that, and it kind of settles down into it, and usually you see like the preseason game 1 to game 2 feeling more comfortable. I also love for the players that may not be in the starting roles to show very rarely is every position group playing, all the way through with, is a clean season, but it's that demonstrated ability, like to see it in the game. And certain positions are even more valuable than others for that evaluation, like a running back or an offensive or defensive lineman, because it is in more control here where did the guy make the tackle or not? Is he able to, full-on blitz pickup or not? So those help because it gives you demonstrated evaluation in that spot. And then for the guys that will play a lot, it is important to get the full speed timing, the connections down, the communication. It just kind of heightens up some. So to me, there's like 3 different buckets of players. The first-year players who are going into the NFL, the players who are fighting for roster spots, as backups and developmental, and then for the guys that are going to play a lot and some starters to say, okay, this is an important part of it to get your timing and your readiness really together. So 3 different spots. That's why we try to customize it, which it can be a little tricky to do that. Who needs what? We try to give a lot of practice time to some players and then not as much to others, and then a lot of game, and then this week it won't be exactly the same as well. So I try to do it on an individual basis as much as I can to think of each player's readiness and also what do we need to see from them.
All right, the NACE Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers. It has been a Washington, D.C. institution for decades. If you feel that you've been wronged, if you think that you've been wronged but aren't sure, contact the NACE Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers, and schedule a no-obligation appointment. Call 202-902-7611 or visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com and tell the NACE Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. The NACE Law Group offers fierce advocacy on behalf of medical malpractice, birth injury, and personal injury victims. Led by the great Chris Nace, the NACE Law Group is focused on providing exceptional care and counsel for those who need such things the most. The NACE Law Group fights for what it believes in, you, your family, and your future. You with the NACE Law Group have an experienced advocate on your side. The NACE Law Group has secured millions of dollars in verdict and settlement amounts for clients to better enable them to care for themselves and their families. Call 202-902-7611 or visit Washington, D.C. injurylawyers.com and tell the NACE Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. That's 202-902-7611 or Washington, D.C. injurylawyers.com, and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. The NACE Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers. As we discussed on Monday's show, episode 1130, the biggest bright spot for the Commanders in their preseason opening 48-18 loss at the New England Patriots on Friday night is that many of the few key Commanders players who did play in the game played well. The team did not play many key players and thus got blown out, but many of the key players who the Commanders did play played well. And among those players were the 5 players taken by the Commanders in the 2025 NFL Draft. First round, the number 29 overall pick, offensive tackle Josh Conerly Jr. out of the University of Oregon. Second round, the number 61 overall pick, cornerback Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. Fourth round, the number 128 overall pick, receiver Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech. Sixth round, the number 205 overall pick, linebacker/safety Kane Medrano out of UCLA. Seventh round, the number 245 overall pick, running back Jacory Croskey-Merritt out of the University of Arizona. For insight on how these guys did on Friday night, I'm very pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Commanders analyst Mark Bullock. Mark is exceptional at talking Commanders from an X's and O's standpoint. He does tremendous Commanders All-22 breakdowns. You can read his work on his Substack, Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark has written for The Athletic and for The Washington Post. He also is a Commanders fan. You can follow Mark on X at Mark Bullock NFL. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, thanks. How about you?
Doing well. Good to talk to you. You and your Substack on Saturday put up a breakdown of Josh Conerly's performance in the loss at the Pats. He played on 29% of the Commanders' offensive snaps, 21 offensive snaps. His overall grade per Pro Football Focus was 69. That's above average. PFF grades are on a scale of 0 to 100. 60 is average. Head coach Dan Quinn, during his postgame press conference late night this past Friday night, did mention Conerly as a standout. Did you like what you saw from him?
Yeah, I certainly think there were things to like. I think you saw the main takeaway for me is that you saw the reasons that he was drafted in the first round. You saw the athleticism, you saw the quick feet, and you saw some improvements in the run game too. That athleticism and quick feet and pass protection was pretty much the number one reason they drafted him. He coming out of college, he had a nice. The athleticism, the ability to match those kind of speed rushers, the elite speed rushers on the edge. He's able to match them for speed and cut them off and negate their threat. And the Patriots tested him quite a bit. They had a couple of rushers line up quite wide in what's known as a wide 9 alignment, where they're outside of wherever the tight end would be, giving them the kind of widest alignment to give him a speed rush at the quarterback, give him a better angle to the quarterback, and Conerly routinely cut those speed rushes off and cut them off comfortably. He wasn't like turning his feet and kind of sprinting out to get to the guy as you see some tackles do. He was very smooth, using his kick slides, getting there very comfortably, not looking troubled, which is obviously very promising and good to see. If you want to be a little bit picky, I would like to see maybe a little more variety in the sets. But obviously, when it's a preseason game, you're not studying the guys that you're going against. You're not understanding okay, in this situation, they like to go to this rush, or they're known for using a spin move, or all of this kind of stuff. You're not studying those moves, so you're not creating a mental kind of game plan of, okay, I want to show him this set and then come back with this set. And for those that don't know what I mean, an offensive tackle will, when they kick slide backwards off the snap, they will use different types of sets. They will go at different angles. And Conerly seemed very intent on gaining width rather than depth. And that's not a bad thing. In certain situations, it's really good to get width and kind of widen the pocket. But there were certain times where you would like to see him get more vertical depth on his sets to just make it a little bit easier on himself, especially with those wide alignments, to be able to cut those off. But he had the foot speed to be able to cut them off, even though he was getting depth rather than width, which is impressive. You would just like to see him vary that up a little bit. But I thought ultimately we saw that was all positives. You saw him get out on a tunnel screen really nicely. And in the run game, I thought he was probably better than I was anticipating him being. He had a little bit more thump to him. They had a couple of combination blocks where he was working with the right guard, and he would have to kind of give a little shove to the defensive tackle to help the guard secure the guy before peeling off and working up to the second level to get a linebacker. And he had a little bit more thump doing that than I anticipated him doing. He would shove the guy inside quite strongly and really help out the guard, and then peel off quite quickly and go get the linebacker without any real troubles. And that sounds like a simple thing to do. It's not when you're 315 pounds and 6'5" and the linebacker's 250. So that was impressive. So I think you saw the traits that he was drafted for, but there's still some kind of fine-tuning with his technique that you'd like to see going forward.
A concern that you and others have had about Josh Conerly is his strength. How do he seem to you in that regard in the loss at the Pats?
I guess there were signs of it in that run game stuff. As I was talking about, he had a little bit more thump to him than I anticipated. In terms of pass protection, he didn't really get tested in that regard. One of the negatives I did have on him in pass protection was there were a few times he left his chest kind of unprotected, or what you'd say exposed, where he would let guys get into his chest and have his hands like kind of low and wide, and rushers that he'd do such a good job of cutting off their speed rush that most speed rushers will then try to convert their speed into power rushes. And so by getting there so quickly, they have no choice but to convert into power. And if he keeps his hands kind of tight or gets his hands on the guy first, then that's great. But he would leave his kind of hands low and wide and leave his chest a little bit exposed. And he had a couple rushers where they got their hands inside on his chest. And I think a better rusher than the guy he was facing most often might have had a better bit of success being able to kind of drive him back and try to bull rush him. Now, to his credit, the couple times that he did leave his chest exposed and he got hit in the chest, he stayed balanced. He gave ground, and part of the advantage of getting so wide, as I talked about earlier with his sets, is that because he's getting width rather than depth, that means he has ground to give behind him. So that might be part of the reason why he was so intent on getting width, is so that he can counter those bull rushes by having more ground behind him to give, to kind of give himself a chance to anchor. And he was able to do that those couple times, but I don't think he was taking on a rusher that was particularly proficient at kind of converting speed to power and driving him back the way some of the guys that he'll face, and certainly in the division, will do. So I think that's still to be determined, but overall still positive signs.
We know that Josh Conerly is competing with Andrew Wiley for the starting right tackle job. Dan Quinn, during a pre-practice press conference on August 2nd, said that rotating Conerly and Wiley at right tackle come the regular season is a possibility, a la the Brandon Coleman, Cornelius Lucas rotation at left tackle last season. But did what you saw from Conerly in the loss at the Pats suggest that he can be the Commander's starting right tackle for Week 1 of the 2025 regular season?
Yeah, I think he's on that track. As I say, there's the kind of finer details that you would like to see change, where like not having his chest exposed and being a little bit more varied in his sets. But the sets thing was something he was actually really good in college. It was varying his sets. So I'd imagine when it comes to actually game planning and studying an opponent, he'd do better in that regard. I guess the question that we wouldn't be able to answer and that they would know is how much he's improved with being able to anchor against those bull rushes. because the Giants will have some guys very early in the season, and the Eagles obviously have got some guys, and the Cowboys have also got some guys. So those guys in the division are pretty good and pretty strong, and can expose him if he hasn't got up to speed or up to strength, I guess, in that regard. But I think he is probably tracking that way. I guess the only reason you would maybe consider that kind of right tackle rotation bit like they did last year would be A, if he got hurt, but B, I think one of the things that stood out in this game in a negative way was there was no real rapport with who was playing right guard. And when you think about it, Connolly's been, mixing with the second team unit and the first team unit. They've had obviously no Sam Cosmi currently at right guard. He might be back in week 1, but at that point, they'll have had basically no reps together. So he's been practicing with Nick Allegretti with the starters, but a bunch of different backups have been rotating in at right guard. So he's not had a chance to develop real rapport. And teams like the Giants are going to run a bunch of stunts at that offensive, that side of the line. And if you don't have a rapport with your right guard, then you might struggle in that regard. And we saw that a little bit there. The one time the Patriots ran a stunt, he struggled a little bit and gave up a pressure, and Sam Hartman did a nice job escaping it. But so that would be one thing that it's like if Sam Cosmi is back healthy, maybe week 1 you use Andrew Wiley to be like, okay, well, Wiley has an established connection with Sam Cosmi, obviously playing together last year, and Cosmi and Connolly have basically no reps together, so maybe you lean on that experience for the start of the year, while Cosmi and Connolly kind of get caught up. But otherwise, I would think Connolly probably wins it out.
You on your Substack on Sunday put up a breakdown of Trey Amos in the loss at the Pats. He played on 20% of the Commanders' defensive snaps, 13 defensive snaps. He, per PFF, had an overall grade of 80.5. What'd you think of Amos?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't tested too much. He only played a couple series, and on I think he played 3 series, and on 2 of them, the Patriots were quite run heavy. But I think you saw some signs of improvement. And one of the things that stood out to me was how patient he was in press coverage. In college, he was known as this big, long, physical corner, and when he was asked to play press coverage, he was quite aggressive with it. And there's good and bad to that. Like it's good if you're aggressive. If you land the jam at the line of scrimmage, you can really disrupt the route and basically take the receiver away straight away at the snap. But if you're super aggressive and you lunge at a guy and you miss, that can be a quick loss as well. And in college, he tended to hit more than he missed, and it worked out fine for him. But in the pros, you would back kind of those experienced receivers, especially as we talked about in the division, guys like A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb and Malik Neighbors even. They're probably going to be able to take advantage of that a little bit more than those college receivers would. So the encouraging thing to see from him in this game was he was a lot more patient at the line of scrimmage, and that's something that this coaching staff and the Dan Quinn and the Pete Carroll kind of tree all preach being patient in press. And what that means is rather than at the snap lunging at a guy and trying to jam them and disrupt them at the line of scrimmage, it's being patient, holding your position at the snap, forcing the receiver to declare, am I releasing outside, am I releasing inside? And then once they've declared which way they're releasing, then you reach out with a hand and get your hands on them and be physical with them at that point. And that's what we saw. So there was the rep that probably everyone's seen now against Matt Collins on that fade down the sideline. He was basically perfect technique there. He was patient at the line of scrimmage. He didn't bail out too early. He didn't go lunging at Hollins. He forced Hollins to kind of declare his release, and Hollins tried to give him a little stutter, and he didn't bite. And then Hollins had to take that outside release, and that's when Amos got his hands on him, forced him a little bit wider, stayed on top of the route, and continued to kind of force him towards the sideline as they went down the field. And then obviously there was no real throwing window, and the ball went out of bounds, so it was a good rep. He had another rep similar in the red zone where the receiver tried to go inside of him. And again, he showed really good patience at the line of scrimmage, forced the receiver to declare his intention, then got his hands on him and stayed on top of the route the whole way. So I think that was a really encouraging sign. I don't think otherwise he wasn't really tested that much. I would say the other thing that stood out was just the size, the ability to match up with different guys. There was a couple different reps where the Patriots moved a tight end outside. Obviously, Matt Collins is a big receiver as well. He was something like 6'4", 225 or something like that. They moved Austin Hooper, who's 6'4", 250, the tight end. They moved him outside, and Amos had a rep against him. And that is something in the past, certainly with the last first-round corner they had, Emmanuel Forbes, you worried about him being able to match up against those big receivers. And again, the point I keep making, we talk about the guys in the division, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, even Malik Neighbors. These guys are big physical receivers, and you need to be able to match up against those guys. And so far, it seems like Amos is tracking to be able to do that.
Much more with Mark Bullock in moments. Catering by Uptown provides catering to perfection. Whatever event you're planning, especially a wedding, visit cateringbyuptown.com. Mention that Al Galdi sent you and see what Catering by Uptown can do for you. Catering by Uptown provides both great service and a great price. Catering by Uptown is a family business. It's run by the Pereiras, who are great Commanders fans and loyal supporters of this podcast. Catering by Uptown specializes in handling everything so that you don't have to. Catering by Uptown understands that special events deserve to be celebrated in style and thus takes care of every detail so that you can enjoy your event. Great service, amazing cuisine, and reliability are the foundation of what makes Catering by Uptown one of the most referred caterers throughout Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia. And know this, if you visit cateringbyuptown.com and click on venues, you can set up your own personal tour of one of Catering by Uptown's premier venues, including outstanding waterfront venues. Catering by Uptown offers the ability to coordinate services at over 100 of the best reception halls, vineyards, farms, historic homes, event venues, banquet facilities, and wedding venues in the area. Visit cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. That's cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. We're talking with Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. You on your Substack on Monday put up a breakdown of Jacory Croskey-Merritt in the loss at the Pats. He in that game had 7 carries for just 24 yards and had 1 reception for 8 yards on 1 target and playing on 24% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. But he, to me, looked pretty good in getting those 24 rushing yards. And he, in the second quarter, had multiple short yardage runs for first down. So that does skew his yards per carry. People, as you know, are rather excited about Jacory Croskey-Merritt. So you better be careful about what you're about to say. But what is your assessment of how the man who has been the star of 2025 Commanders training camp, the man known as Bill, did on Friday night?
Yeah, I thought it was encouraging. I'm not going to go into the levels of hype that there have been for him based on a 7-carry, 24-yard game. But it was definitely encouraging. You saw the traits that he was drafted for. You saw he had his biggest run of the game was that 9-yard run, where you saw the vision to. First, the patience at the line of scrimmage. He felt the tight end get kind of blocked across his face, and he showed patience to allow that block to develop and cut behind it. Then the vision to spot a lane on the front side and the burst to attack that lane. And then the contact balance to fight through a couple of different arm tackles and keep bursting through and fall forward and maximize the gain. So there was certainly a lot of encouragement there. He had the only other real run of significant gain was there was an inside zone run where you had a tight end sifting back across, and Josh Conerly actually made a nice job getting up to the second level and blocking a linebacker. The tight end sifted behind him and cut off the defensive end, and he did a nice job following that cut backwards behind it. Luke McCaffrey came in and blocked the safety, and he did a nice job working the lane behind that and picking up a solid 5 yards there. And then, you talked about the 2 short yardage runs. There was a 2nd and 1 that was a duo scheme. And again, I think it was Cole Turner at tight end kind of had a defensive end crash inside of him. And he did a nice job of actually avoiding that block. That kind of the defensive end crashing inside kind of was screwing up what he was trying to do. He was playing it patient, reading off the Mike linebacker, just trying to decide which way he was going to go. And then that that defensive end crashed inside and kind of made him go, okay, well, I just need to pick up this 1 yard. And so he kind of just turned on the jets and burst forward and picked up that 1 yard that the defensive end made the tackle, but he got the first down conversion. And then there was the 3rd and 1 later in the game. They ran a zone scheme, and that was almost his most impressive run. And it was only a 1 or 2 yard gain to pick up the first down. But right at the snap, the center and the right guard had a bit of a miscommunication. The center didn't help the right guard take on the nose tackle. He just immediately climbed up to the linebacker, and that put the right guard on the back foot, and the nose tackle was able to penetrate a little bit. And as soon as Croskey-Merritt kind of got the ball, he was having to adjust his path to kind of bounce outside a little bit more. But as soon as he started to bounce outside, Trent Scott at left tackle lost his block. And so suddenly he had a defensive end crashing in on him and a nose tackle crashing in on him. And he made a really sharp cut to cut between the two of them, break through a little arm tackle and burst forward to pick up a couple yards and pick up that first down. So again, saw the traits, the burst, the vision, the sharp, explosive cutting. Those were encouraging signs. But, it's hard to get carried away with 7 carries for 24 yards. But there were certainly encouraging signs. And I think the other encouraging thing was his ability as a receiver. He had 2 catches, one of which was called out was wiped out by a holding penalty. But you saw the ability to get out, make both catches. Actually, he made some nice adjustments to the ball. The first one that was wiped out by the penalty, the ball was a little bit thrown behind him, and you wouldn't necessarily have realized it from the way he played it. He did a nice job of keeping his momentum, but turning his body, getting his hands back and making a hands catch behind himself and pulling the ball in without breaking stride. And that was really impressive. That's harder to do than it looks, and he made it look real smooth. And then the second catch, he was meant to just sit down over the ball, and Josh Johnson kind of led him almost into a tackle with a high throw and a little bit wide. And he made, again, a nice adjustment to go up and get the ball away from his body, secure the pass, and then immediately turn, locate the nearest defenders and make that guy miss. So there's some encouragement on that regard. We never really got to see him as a pass catcher in college. So that's something we didn't know that he could do. And that's some encouragement. But the thing I would say on that, before people get too hyped up about that, is the pass protection has to come a long way before he's ready to be trusted as a pass catcher. If you're going to be in there on third downs catching passes, you've also got to be able to be in there on third downs and protect the quarterback first and foremost. And he was clearly part of the game that he wasn't used to. He was a little bit slow in his kind of scanning to find blitzers. And the one time that the Patriots did send a linebacker blitz at him, he was a little bit slow to identify it and step up, but he did step up towards it. And then he looked kind of unsure of himself. He was like, should I be stepping up and being aggressive and going and thumping this guy? Should I be trying to set for him? In the end, he kind of started to give ground as the linebacker got towards him. And the linebacker just gave a real quick stutter and then was able to burst through his block real quickly. He was just lucky that Sam Hartman was able to get the ball out on time and avoid kind of a sack or a pressure. But it wasn't a great rep, and it kind of not necessarily unexpected from a guy that has basically been a workhorse back that doesn't play on third down. But it's something that if he is going to develop that kind of pass catching side, which he showed the potential to do, the pass protection is going to have to come a long way first.
Running back, for a variety of reasons, is a position at which fans can really become engaged with someone during training camp and the preseason. We've had this with Washington many times over the years, and sometimes the training camp / preseason hype proves to have been warranted. Alfred Morris in 2012 is a good example of that. But sometimes the training camp / preseason hype ends up looking silly. Jarrett Patterson in 2021 is a good example of that. Is there any way to tell whether Jacory Croskey-Merritt is more Alfred Morris or Jarrett Patterson?
I mean, you never really know until you know. So you never really know until they're in there against like the number one units. But you can also argue that, you know, if they're running with the backups, they've got backup offensive linemen blocking for them, and you know the quality of in the NFL of backup offensive linemen is low. There's not enough starting offensive linemen to go around, so the backups aren't great. But You look for the traits, right? You look for are there traits that translate regardless of the quality of opposition and the quality of blockers in front of him. So, like the things we talked about, the burst, the vision, the explosive cutting ability, that that is all stuff that he just has. That's stuff that will work regardless of who's against. Um, the stuff that you need to see is the ability to break those tackles against proper, NFL linebackers. Like if he's working against Bobby Wagner, I think Bobby Wagner's probably going to make a few of the tackles that he broke on Friday night. But that doesn't mean to say he can't break tackles of other linebackers. Like there are linebackers in the league that don't tackle very well. But you look for those traits. You look for can he be consistent? Like with Alfred Morris, you saw a guy that was super consistent with how he read the outside zone scheme that they ran, and obviously that Shanahan system was well known for that wide zone scheme, the occasional inside zones, and wanting it to be read the exact same way every time. And Alfred Morris was very, very consistent with reading it out correctly, hitting the right angles, hitting the right landmarks, and then making the correct cut. And so that was what translated for him. And Jared Patterson had some of those traits as well, but he wasn't consistent with it. And he was, if I think if he had just been in that Shanahan zone scheme where they just ran zone, he would have probably been a little bit better than he was. But by that time he was there, it was they mixed in a bunch of different schemes, and he didn't quite suit necessarily the gap scheme stuff, or like kind of duos and power and counter kind of thing. So that's what you're kind of looking for, is the traits that translate. And I think Croskey-Merritt does have some of those traits, but again, you have to kind of wait and see. I think that's the thing that Dan Quinn has been kind of preaching throughout training camp, is you never really know until you see them in the game thumping on guys that are actually going to be playing in the league. And hopefully this week against the Bengals, we'll get to see him against some starters. But even the Bengals defense isn't that great. So I guess we'll have to wait and see until the regular season.
Jalen Lane, you feel like the Commanders in a loss at the Pats hid Lane a little bit, right?
Yeah, I kind of felt like they did, because he only had something like 14 snaps and hardly got targeted. I think he only had one target or two targets, and one of them was a wild throw from Hartman that was way above his head and he had no chance of getting. And even one of the things that stood out to me when I studied Jalen Lane after the draft was he was really good at making adjustments to high passes. Like he could go up and get the ball, and even he couldn't go up and get some of those throws. So Hartman had a poor game. But Lane, I thought he did some nice things. I thought he showed. They had the little 2-minute drill with Josh Johnson came in just before the half, and they went and had I think it was a field goal drive, and it was a nice little 2-minute drill that they ran. But in that drive, there was like 3 or 4 plays where you saw the things that they want to see from Jalen Lane. Like he was in the slot. The first thing that he ran was just a kind of corner out from the slot, and he burst off the snap and got up to speed so quickly that the slot corner was immediately behind him, and he instantly got stacked on top of him. And a quarterback that had seen him might have been able to throw that deep ball down the field and hit it. Josh Johnson was working the other side of the field, so didn't see it. But 2 plays later, they ran a dagger concept, and it was the nice catch that Tay Martin had, one of the few catches that a receiver made in this game. That one, again, you saw the speed from Jalen Lane, the real threat of that speed, where he was in the slot and he was running the clear out route. So he just has to get down the field as quick as he can, grab a safety in the slot corner and take them down the field and vacate space behind him for the dig from the outside. And he got off so quickly and he was down the field so quickly that the safety in the corner the safety in the slot corner were both like, oh God, we got to turn and run and get with him and stop him going. And that opened up a huge lane for Martin. And the one other route that stood out to me was later on in that drive, he ran, it was, I think it was like 3rd and 10, and he ran what was essentially just a curl route in the slot. But the way he ran it, and from having already shown his speed, the slot corner was terrified of him. He kind of initially, he was in the slot and kind of by the numbers, and he initially angled his route kind of slightly outside, and the slot corner was kind of worried about that, so he started to open his hips and turn to run down the sideline. And Lane then kind of angled his path back inside like he was going to run a post route. And the slot corner did a speed turn. He turned his hips kind of completely away from the quarterback, speed turning around to try to stay on top of the post route. And then Jalen Lane just broke off his route quite sharply on this curl route. And he has 5, 6, 7, 8 yards of separation from the slot corner at that point. And again, Josh Johnson was working the other side of the field, so didn't see it. But those 3 routes, you really saw the speed. You saw some more route running nous than you would necessarily have seen from him in college, which was encouraging. There were a few sloppy, shorter routes. There was a couple just like speed outs from the slot that weren't particularly well set up. So he still needs some work there. But you definitely see the speed and the vertical threat that you can bring from the slot. That was legit. And it really had the corner, like the 2 series that he was out there, he had that slot corner terrified about that speed.
One more for you. Kane Medrano. He in the loss at the Pats played a lot. He played on 89% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Defensive coordinator Joe Wood Jr. has been blunt about how the team itself is trying to figure out whether Medrano is more of a linebacker or a safety. Off what you saw from him in the game, is he more linebacker or safety?
Yeah, I was a little bit more encouraged about his ability to be a linebacker in this game. I thought he was going to be a safety. I thought that's where he was going to end up. Because in college he really struggled to tackle. That was his biggest problem, was tackling. He'd get himself in some decent positions, but he would just miss tackles constantly. But as a coverage defender, he has such great athleticism, and he can match against a very wide variety of bodies. He can match smaller, quicker guys. He can match bigger, more physical guys. He's got such great coverage upside that I thought maybe he'll just end up at safety. But in this game, he obviously played linebacker, and you could see early on he was a little bit hesitant. There was a couple runs early on where he was kind of not sure, should I be filling here, should I be filling there? And you'd see him kind of pause at the snap, and then that would allow a guy to come up and block him. But as they got into the game, as he got a little bit more confident in himself, and probably as he got a talking to on the sideline, he showed a little bit more aggressiveness and a little bit more assertiveness and trusting what he was reading. And rather than kind of pausing and going, what am I meant to be doing? It was, well, if I'm wrong, but I'm going to do it fast. And you saw that aggressiveness. And I think it was the 3rd series that the Patriots had the ball. He had a really nice play where the starting center climbed up to him quick off the ball. And I don't think he was sure of where he was meant to be going, but he saw the center climb up to him, and he just went, okay, I'm just going to thump that guy. And he sprinted up, thumped him, got his hands in, and shed the block immediately and made the tackle. And that was something you didn't see from him in college. He wasn't a kind of thump, shed, block kind of guy. He was I'm a 220-pound linebacker. I'm going to avoid this big center running at me. So that was encouraging to see. And then later in the game, down on the goal line, he had again, where he just kind of saw it and went. There was a gap emerging between the center and the right guard, and he just attacked the gap. He just ran straight through. He didn't make the play, but the running back saw him coming so early and saw the hole emerge so early that the running back had to cut his run back, and Tyler Owens actually came off the edge and made the stop immediately because the back had to make the cut. So there were some encouraging signs there. There were some real interesting things that he did in terms of his role. He kind of did almost the Frankie Louvu kind of role. There was times when he was playing the Mike linebacker in the Bobby Wagner role, but there was times where he would do the Louvu thing of moving around and lining up on the edge and blitzing off the edge. He didn't necessarily have any kind of rush that was like, oh god, that's a really good rush. He could be used in that way, but there was 1 or 2 rushes where you could see the quickness that could trouble some guys. And the coverage thing, he never really got tested in coverage, but he did match the guys that he did get matched up against and stayed on top of those routes and took them away. But they were mostly like running backs chipping to the flat and stuff like that. So it was never really a huge coverage assignment where he was like turning and running with a tight end up the seam or anything like that. So, but I think that's the thing you'd feel most confident about is his coverage ability. So the things to see him improve up front and be physical was encouraging. I don't recall him missing a tackle, which is also encouraging. But he also didn't make too many, so you kind of have to play those off against each other. But I think there was encouraging signs from him that he could maybe be more than just a safety and perhaps be a linebacker.
Well, plenty of other Commanders players missed tackles on Friday night, so we were well supplied in that department. Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. A must-read if you're a Commanders fan. Mark, thanks, and we'll talk soon.
Of course, talk soon.
Well, if ever there was a national starting pitcher who needed to exit his outing on a high note, that pitcher was starting pitcher Cade Cavalli on Monday night. And so what happened on Monday night was tough. The Nats lost at the Kansas City Royals 7-4 on Monday night in Game 1 of a 3-game series. So this was a game in which the Nats blew a 4-2 sixth-inning lead. The Nats in MLB's 2025 regular season now are 47-71, worst record in the National League East, second worst record in the National League. Cade Cavalli on Monday night made his second start since being promoted back to the majors. The Nats took Cavalli out of the University of Oklahoma with the number 22 overall pick in the 2020 MLB draft, but he, due to injury and ineffectiveness, had made just one major league regular season start, which was all the way back on August 26, 2022. He, in March 2023, underwent Tommy John surgery on his right elbow. He was not having a good 2025 season for AAA Rochester, but the Nats on August 6 announced having recalled Cavalli from AAA Rochester, and he and the Nats' 2-1 walk-off win over the Athletics at Nationals Park on August 6 did well. He tossed 4 1/3 scoreless innings with 6 strikeouts versus 1 walk. He gave up just 3 hits, all of which were singles. He threw a lot of pitches, but also a lot of strikes. 88 pitches, 59 strikes, just 29 balls, and his pitch count was high thanks in part to 2 throwing errors by the Nats. And so all of this brought us to Monday night. Cavalli allowed 4 runs in 5 innings. He gave up 7 hits, which were a home run and 6 singles. He issued 3 walks. He recorded 3 strikeouts. He threw 88 pitches, 50 strikes, 38 balls. But Cavalli allowed 2 runs in 5 innings. And it was at that point in the game that I said to myself, all right, get him out of the game. 2 runs in 5 innings, a nice, acceptable final line, makes for a second consecutive encouraging start. This guy needs that. Get him out on a high note. Instead, Nats interim manager Miguel Cairo had Cavalli go back out for the bottom of the 6th. I get the thinking. The pitch count was low, but Cavalli in the bottom of the 6th faced 3 batters and got no outs, including giving up a 2-run homer by Salvador Perez to left field to tie the game at 4. And so 2 runs in 5 innings became 4 runs in 5 innings. That was a shame. The Nats offense in this 7-4 loss at the Royals on Monday night was good, but really should have been better. The Nats scored 4 runs, but should have scored more runs. The Nats totaled 9 hits and worked 4 walks, but went 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position. The 9 hits were 2 home runs, 2 doubles, and 5 singles. James Wood, who was great in the Nats winning 2 out of 3 games at the San Francisco Giants over the weekend, had another good game. He is the Nats starting left fielder and number 1 batter, went 2 for 4 with 2 singles and a walk. So maybe, just maybe, the James Wood slump is in fact over. 2 Nats players who were really good over the final 2 games at the Giants over the weekend were really good on Monday night. Talking about Josh Bell and Paul DeJong. Bell, as the Nats starting DH and number 4 batter, went 1 for 5 with a 2-run homer. He and the Nats 2-run first, had a 2-out 2-run homer to left center field for a 2-0 Nats lead. The homer went a projected 422 feet per StatCast. Man, is Josh Bell hot. He, for this regular season, now has an OPS of 736. This off being at 640 as of the end of June. And Paul DeJong, he is the Nats starting 3rd baseman and number 3 batter, went 2 for 4 with a 2-run homer, a single, and a walk. DeJong in the Nats 2-run 5th had a 1-out opposite field 2-run homer to right center field for a 4-2 Nats lead. That homer went a projected 418 feet per StatCast. DeJong for this month of August has an OPS of 1,068. Josh Bell and Paul DeJong, 2 veterans, each on a 1-year contract. Each guy, disappointingly, was not traded prior to the 2025 MLB trade deadline on July 31st. That each guy is doing well right now is nice, but also meaningless for this team. And I don't like that outfielder Robert Hassel III is not getting regular plate appearances. He could at least be DHing, but we're instead seeing a lot of Bell and DeYoung. A young Nats outfielder who is playing a lot right now is Dalen Lyle. He is the Nats starting right fielder and number 7 batter, went 2 for 4 with a double and a single. Lyle's hot. He, for this month of August, has an OPS of 882. Luis Garcia Jr. was back. He returned from a 3-game absence caused by back tightness. He is the Nats starting second baseman and number 8 batter, went 0 for 3. And CJ Abrams had a rough game. He is the Nats starting shortstop and number 2 batter, went 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts. The Nats relief pitching in this 7-4 loss at the Royals on Monday night. Not good. 4 Nats relievers combined to allow 3 runs in 3 innings. Jackson Rutledge allowed 2 runs in 1 inning. He hit a Royals 4-run 6, faced 5 batters and got 3 outs, but 2 of the outs came on a double play, and he gave up a 2-out, 2-run homer by the Royals' number 9 batter, Kyle Isbell, to right field for a 6-4 Royals lead. Jackson Rutledge in this regular season now has allowed 13 home runs in just 53 and a third innings. He has had a big-time home run problem. Clayton Beeter tossed a perfect bottom of the 7th with 2 strikeouts. Orlando Revolta officially allowed 1 run in a third of an inning. He in the bottom of the 8th faced 3 batters but got just 1 out. And Shinosuke Ogasawara in the bottom of the 8th faced 3 batters and got 2 outs, so one of which was a 1-out RBI sac fly for a 7-4 Royals lead. Game 2 for the Nats at the Royals, Tuesday night at 7:40. Mitchell Parker will be the Nats starting pitcher. And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Wednesday show, episode 1132. Will include a lot for you on the Commanders. Also on Wednesday show, I'll talk Nationals and Orioles. The Nats are at the Kansas City Royals Tuesday night at 7:40 in Game 2 of a 3-game series. The O's are home to the Seattle Mariners Tuesday evening at 6:35 in Game 1 of a 3-game series. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Tomorrow we'll have a Burgundy and Gold game.